The transmission cuts through interstellar space like a scream in the night, raw, desperate, and filled with such profound anguish that monitoring stations across 17 species report equipment failures from the emotional overload. The Argosians, masters of crystalline technology and telepathic architecture, are dying. Their once magnificent cities, visible from orbit as latticeworks of living crystal, now pulse with sickly, irregular light as a neurotoxic plague ravages their neural networks. Commander Saren Tavik of Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Station collapses when the signal first hits, blood trickling from her ears. As medical staff rush to her aid, she grabs the station director's arm with surprising strength. "They're screaming," she whispers. "Millions of them, all at once." Within hours, the Galactic Confederation convenes emergency sessions. The Doraks, with their quantum-based consciousness, calculate a 97.3% mortality rate for any contact mission. The Mythlar, oldest members of the Confederation, cite 37 historical precedents arguing against intervention. All species reach the same conclusion, except humans. In the medical bay of United Earth headquarters, Dr. Elena Reyes watches the Argosian transmission again, tears streaming down her face as the alien emotions wash over her. When Admiral Kingston enters to inform her that the Confederation has voted against intervention, her response is immediate. "Then we go alone." Kingston hesitates. "The Confederation will impose sanctions." Reyes doesn't look away from the screen. "Some things matter more than trade agreements, Admiral." The aftermath of the transmission ripples through Earth's major population centers. Unlike other Confederation species who filter such signals through sophisticated emotional dampeners, humans receive the raw feed. Emergency services are overwhelmed with cases of sympathetic neural shock. Yet instead of spurring isolation, the shared experience catalyzes an unprecedented wave of volunteers. Crowds gather outside United Earth recruitment centers, many still wearing medical monitoring devices. "This is madness," declares Zethnar Ambassador Vox 117 during an emergency consultation. "Your primitive limbic systems cannot distinguish between logical imperatives and emotional manipulation." The Argosians' suffering, while regrettable, triggers irrational response patterns in human neural architecture. Admiral Kingston studies the latest volunteer numbers on his datavat. Perhaps what you call irrational is simply a different form of calculation, one that values sentient life above statistical probabilities. "You risk your species standing in the Confederation," the Zethnar warns, compound eyes reflecting the holographic displays of diplomatic sanctions protocols. And for what? A telepathic species whose mental architecture is fundamentally incompatible with human cognition. You cannot even properly communicate with them without risking neural damage. Dr. Reyes, entering midway through the exchange, places a data crystal on the table between them. "Then we'll build better translators." The crystal projects schematics for neural dampening fields and telepathic conversion matrices, experimental technology never before deployed at scale. "My team has been working on cross-species neural interfaces since we joined the Confederation. Theoretical until now, but the principles are sound." Sound is not tested. The Zethnar objects. "You propose sending human medical teams into a telepathic maelstrom with experimental shielding. The casualties among your own people will be catastrophic." Kingston and Reyes exchange glances. "We've already received twice as many volunteers as we need," the Admiral replies quietly. "Every one of them fully briefed on the risks." "Why?" the Zethnar demands, exoskeleton vibrating with genuine confusion. "Why risk everything for aliens you've never met?" Reyes considers the question carefully. "Because someday it might be us sending that distress signal. And I'd like to believe someone would answer." As the meeting concludes, Kingston accesses a secured channel to Earth's orbital shipyards. "Prepare the Nightingale for immediate launch," he orders, "and fast-track the retrofits on the Santiago and Curie. We leave in 72 hours. The Zethnar, departing for its shuttle, pauses at a viewport overlooking Earth. Below, city lights trace human civilization across continents. Fragile, brief, determined. For the first time, the alien feels something unexpected when regarding humans. Uncertainty. The Confederation Grand Chamber falls silent as the holographic projection of Argosia rotates above the central days, a planet wrapped in tendrils of mural light that pulse with increasing irregularity. The Zethnar delegate, Ambassador Vox 117, glides forward on articulated limbs that click against the polished floor. The mathematical certainty is absolute, it announces, compound eyes reflecting the hologram's light. Argosian extinction represents a 0.037% reduction in Confederation cognitive resources. Rescue attempts risk cross-species contamination with projected casualties exceeding 4.3% of member populations. The equation is simple. Human Ambassador Jackson Chen rises from his seat, the newest and plainest chair in the chamber. Simple. His voice rises as he approaches the days. Let me simplify further. That's 8 billion sentient beings crying out for help. The chamber erupts in overlapping translation fields as multiple species object simultaneously. The ancient Mythlar representative, a being of flowing plasma contained in ceremonial armor, hovers before Chen. Your species has been spacefaring for less than 2 centuries. You have not witnessed extinction events as we have. Your emotional reasoning will destroy you. Chen places his hand directly on the holographic projection, his fingers passing through the representation of Argosia. Perhaps we haven't learned proper galactic callousness yet, he says quietly. Where I come from, we have names for those who pass by suffering, and none of them are flattering. The Zethanar's exoskeleton vibrates with agitation. Your primitive species lacks the capacity to comprehend the complexity. Chen cuts him off. And yet somehow we understand a simple cry for help. When the chamber votes 24-1 against intervention, Chen removes his Confederation insignia and drops it on the floor. Humanity respectfully recuses itself from this decision. We will render aid under our own authority. The Dorax representative's quantum voice ripples through the chamber. You will trigger sanctions under Article 17. Chen doesn't look back as he strides toward the exit. Bill us. The diplomatic aftershocks hit with immediate fury. Chen's secure terminal lights up with urgent messages from 17 council members, ranging from threats to condescending offers to reconsider humanity's rash position. He ignores them all, focused instead on coordinating with Earth's emergency response teams. They've frozen our trade accounts, his aide reports, scrolling through financial alerts, and suspended our access to Confederation technology exchanges. Expected, Chen replies without looking up from the medical supply manifests. What about the Martian colonies? That's interesting. The aide's expression shifts to surprise. Mars is officially complying with sanctions, but their medical division just accidentally shipped 6 months of mural stabilizers to our loading docks before the sanctions hit. Similar inventory errors reported from 3 other colonies. Chen allows himself a small smile. Plausible deniability. Smart. Outside the embassy windows, Confederation security vessels move into quarantine formation, their sleek hulls reflecting the system's primary star. The subtle message is clear. Earth vessels attempting to leave will face interdiction. Ambassador, his aide says quietly. Confederation Military Command has classified this as a potential cross-species contamination event. They're authorized to use force to prevent our ships from reaching Argosia. Chen studies the military vessels thoughtfully. Have you ever heard of the Kinder Transport, Maya, or the Berlin Airlift? When she shakes her head, he continues. Ancient Earth history, times when people found ways around blockades to save lives. With respect, sir, those were human conflicts with human solutions. The principles remain the same. Chen activates a secure channel. Get me Admiral Kingston. I need to know exactly how much maneuverability the Nightingale has, and whether her sensor package can be calibrated to detect patrol gaps. Maya pales. You're suggesting we run the blockade. The Confederation fleet has quantum targeting systems. They also have regulations, Chen counters. Article 17 allows for sanctions and interdiction, but Article 4 prohibits firing on humanitarian vessels without direct council authorization, which requires a separate vote they haven't held yet. He smiles grimly. They think we don't know their own laws as well as they do. As night falls on the embassy, Shen records what might be his final message as ambassador. He doesn't mention the Argosians or the coming mission. Instead, he simply reads from an ancient text, his voice steady. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. He pauses, then adds, even friends he has never met. The UES Nightingale, Earth's most advanced medical research vessel, breaks orbit with dramatic flares of its experimental Hawking drives. Across Earth's major cities, crowds gather to watch the live streams as 4 additional medical ships ascend to join it. The Santiago, the Curie, the Salk, and the Sabin. Military vessels move into escort formation. The destroyers Shield-Bearer, Vigilant, and the newly commissioned Defiance. News networks dub them the Mercy Fleet before they've cleared the solar system. Inside the Nightingale's preparation bay, Dr. Elena Reyes moves through organized chaos. Research teams calibrate equipment designed for alien physiology, while military personnel install experimental neural dampening fields. These won't hold if the plague adapts, warns Dr. Caftry, adjusting his protective suit. Reyes nods grimly. Then we adapt faster. On the Defiance's bridge, Captain Mira Okonkwo studies tactical displays with growing concern. 3 Confederation vessels shadowing us, maintaining parallel vector. Her tactical officer points to another reading. And these energy signatures, unidentified vessels running dark. Okonkwo narrows her eyes, keeping their official distance while watching us fail. The ship's AI interrupts. Captain, receiving transmission from unregistered vessel approaching at high velocity. The view screen activates to show a reptilian face with golden scales. I am Commander Shesik of the independent vessel Broken Chains. My crew are dissidents from the corrected Imperium. We bring medical supplies and 50 volunteers with specialized knowledge of neural chemistry. Before Okonkwo can respond, 2 more unidentified ships decloak nearby. This is Starborn Wanderer, from the Mythlar Outworlds. The plasma being's voice sounds almost embarrassed. Our elders voted against you. Not all Mythlar agree. The 3rd ship transmits only text. Zethnar Science Vessel, Rational Inquiry. Our presence violates collective consensus. We bring modified shielding technology. Some equations value life above risk. Lieutenant Commander Park turns to Okonkwo, eyes wide. They're defying their own governments. Okonkwo watches as the 3 ships fall into formation with the human fleet. No, she says quietly. They're remembering who they were before fear made them forget. 8 days into the journey, the United Fleet encounters its first direct challenge, a Confederation border patrol. 6 heavily armed vessels arranged in standard interdiction pattern, moves to block their approach to the transgalactic corridor that would shorten their journey to Argosia by 17 days. They're hailing us, Captain, reports Communications Officer Diaz. Priority channel from the lead vessel. The view screen reveals a Dorax commander, their quantum form precisely calibrated to Project Authority. Human Fleet, you are in violation of Confederation Quarantine Directive 17A. Reverse course immediately or face disablement. Okonkwo rises from her command chair. This is Captain Mira Okonkwo of the Earth vessel Defiance. We are on a humanitarian mission to Argosia under Article 9 of the Sentient Rights Charter, which the Confederation itself ratified 200 years ago. Article 9 requires Confederation approval. The Dorax counters swiftly. Not for non-member worlds, Okonkwo replies. Check your records, Commander. Argosia formally withdrew its Confederation membership 3 days ago, when you denied them aid. Their provisional government has specifically requested Earth's assistance. The Dorax commander's form wavers slightly, a sign of rapid internal consultation. This interpretation of statutes is irregular. Perhaps, Okonkwo acknowledges. but it is legally sound. You may escort us if you wish, but any attempt to prevent our passage will constitute an illegal action under your own laws." After a tense silence, the Dorax commander signals to someone off-screen. "We will verify this claim. Maintain position until—" "We will continue on course," Okonkwo interrupts firmly. "You're welcome to verify while escorting us." As the Mercy fleet pushes forward, the Confederation vessels reluctantly give way, falling into escort formation at a distance that preserves their authority while tacitly acknowledging the legal quandary. In the Nightingale's medical bay, Dr. Rice receives the news with raised eyebrows. A technical loophole. That's how we're getting through. Dr. Caffrey laughs softly as he continues programming neural stabilizers. Sun Tzu said the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. "We're not at war," Rice corrects automatically. Caffrey glances at the tactical display showing the Confederation vessels. "Tell them that." "Neural dampening at maximum," announces Lieutenant Sato as the shuttle descends through Argosia's shimmering atmosphere. Despite the protection, everyone on board winces as waves of psychic anguish wash over them like invisible tides. The crystalline cities below, once celebrated as architectural wonders throughout the galaxy, now pulse with sickly, irregular patterns. Some structures have begun to fracture, mirroring the broken minds of their creators. When the landing party steps onto Argosian soil, their specially designed helmets immediately fog with condensation, a side effect of the temperature differential created by millions of overheating Argosian brains. Dr. Rice leads the team toward the central communion spire, following the coordinates provided in the distress signal. The streets are littered with fallen Argosians, their translucent bodies contorted in poses of agony, neural pathways visible beneath their skin flickering like dying circuitry. Most disturbing is the silence, a telepathic species suffering in absolute psychic isolation, each victim trapped in private hell. Inside what appears to be a medical facility, Dr. Caffrey's scanner emits a series of alarming beeps. "Elena, look at this molecular structure." Rice studies the holographic display, her expression darkening. "These markers, they're synthetic, deliberately engineered to target telepathic communication centers." She looks around at the suffering Argosians. "This isn't a plague. It's a weapon." The Mythlar scientist from the Starbound Wanderer hovers at the edge of the medical facility, its plasma form contracting in apparent distress. "This architecture, it communicates through its translator. It resembles quantum phase disruption technology, but reconfigured for biological systems. The Confederation has banned such research for 3 centuries. Dr. Caffrey notes, continuing his scans. "Official prohibition rarely prevents development. The Mythlar counters, merely drives it into shadow." Near the central communication hub, a team of human technicians works to restore power to the Argosian equivalent of a medical database. The crystalline interface responds sluggishly, damaged by the neural feedback that accompanies the plague. "Got something," calls out technical specialist Rodriguez. "Looks like early infection analysis, before their systems were completely overwhelmed." The holographic display flickers to life, showing 3-dimensional renderings of the plague's progression through Argosian neural tissue. Dr. Rice studies the data, brow furrowed. "The infection pattern. It's too precise, too targeted." She points to a specific neural pathway. "Look here, it systematically attacks the telepathic centers first, then spreads to autonomic functions, but leaves consciousness intact. The victims remain aware while losing all connection to others of their kind. Maximum psychological trauma." Dr. Caffrey concludes grimly. "It's not just killing them, it's torturing them first." Outside the facility, Captain Okonkwo supervises the deployment of mobile containment units. Her security team maintains a perimeter, scanning constantly for threats. Lieutenant Kagawa approaches with a disturbing report. "Captain, we've detected unusual energy signatures at the edge of the city, similar to the ones we picked up shadowing us en route. Whoever engineered this is watching," Okonkwo realizes. "Make sure all teams maintain communication protocols." No one operates alone. As sunset bathes the crystalline city in blood-red light, the human team establishes a forward operating base in what once served as an Argosian civic center. Dr. Rice works with the dissident alien scientists to configure portable stasis fields, a temporary measure to halt the plague's progression in the worst affected victims. The first successful stasis activation comes just before midnight. An Argosian elder, hours from neural collapse, stabilizes within the modified field. Though still unconscious, the erratic flickering of their neural pathways steadies into a sustainable rhythm. It's working, Dr. Katri confirms, monitoring the readings. But this is just buying time. Dr. Rice nods, exhaustion evident in her movements. Deploy every field we have. Target those closest to collapse first. She stares out at the suffering city, illuminated by the eerie glow of millions of dying neural systems, and prepare the surgical bay on the Nightingale. We need to attempt direct neural interface with one of them. It's the only way to truly understand what we're facing. That procedure has never been attempted between humans and telepaths, warns the Zethnar scientist. The neural feedback could be fatal. I'm aware of the risks, Rise responds quietly. I'll be the test subject. The Nightingale's laboratory has been transformed into a chaotic nexus of human innovation. Holographic Argosian neural pathways float alongside human brain scans, while dozens of treatment simulations run simultaneously on every available surface. Dr. Rice hasn't slept in 36 hours, subsisting on synthetic caffeine and determination. The visiting alien scientists watch with a mixture of confusion and growing respect as the humans operate in what appears to be beautiful disorder, following hunches, discarding failed approaches without ego, and building on each other's ideas without formal protocol. You're making no sense, protests the Zethnar scientist, compound eyes rapidly blinking as Dr. Katri simultaneously tests 3 contradictory approaches. These methodologies are incompatible with each other. That's the point, Rise explains, manipulating a molecular model with both hands. Human brains evolved with unusual neuroplasticity. We don't just think differently from the Argosians. We think differently from each other, and differently than we did yesterday. She points to the brain scans. What makes us weaker than many species intellectually also makes us nearly impossible to target with a single vector attack. Our inconsistency is our strength. The post-neural interface data floods the system as Dr. Rice recovers in the medical bay. Though the connection lasted only 17 seconds before safety protocols terminated it, the information gathered proves invaluable. Specialist Amare, the team's senolinguist, studies the patterns with growing excitement. Look at this sequence. She indicates a recurring pattern in the Argosian neural signal. It's not random degradation. There's structure here, almost like a programming language, finishes Dr. Katri. The plague isn't just destroying their neural connections. It's rewriting them. Lieutenant Zhang from Information Warfare Division steps forward, his experience with counter-hacking operations suddenly relevant. If this is code, we can decode it. And if we can decode it, we can potentially reverse it, Rice concludes, entering the lab against medical advice, her skin still pale from the neural interface attempt. While the research team works to decipher the plague's underlying code, Captain Okonkwo leads a covert operation on the planet's surface. The mysterious energy signatures have been triangulated to a remote crystalline formation at the edge of the capital city. Tactical Team Sigma, equipped with experimental stealth technology borrowed from their Mythlar allies, approaches the site under cover of an electrical storm. Movement detected, whispers Lieutenant Kagawa through the secure comm. Humanoid, but wrong. Through enhanced optics, they observe a figure adjusting equipment within the crystalline structure, a being whose skin shifts between visibility and transparency, revealing glimpses of circuit-like patterns beneath. The capture operation proceeds with surgical precision. 2 security officers sustain unusual electrical burns in the process, but the target is successfully contained and transported to the Defiance's high-security holding facility. Initial scans reveal physiology unlike anything in Confederation databases, a hybrid of organic tissue and something resembling living circuitry, capable of generating and manipulating bioelectrical fields with extraordinary precision. Most unsettling is the being's response to captivity, not fear or anger, but a cold calculation betrayed only by the scrolling patterns visible beneath its semi-transparent skin. Dr. Rice stands outside the containment field, studying their prisoner with clinical detachment. "Can you understand me?" she asks simply. The being responds not with sound, but with patterns of bioelectrical energy that cause nearby equipment to fluctuate. After several attempts, the ship's advanced translation systems begin to interpret the signals. Containment temporary, the translator renders. Eradication necessary. Security protocol absolute. Why target the Argosians? Rise presses. What threat did they pose? The being's skin flickers rapidly between transparency and opacity, what Dr. Amari later identifies as their equivalent of agitation. Detection equals extinction. Telepathic species perceive our encryption. Compromise. Unacceptable. The Argosian elder, watching through a neural dampening field, projects a wave of rage so intense that several monitoring systems overload. Asterisk destroy it immediately. Asterisk demands the telepathic voice. Asterisk they understand only annihilation asterisk. Captain Okonkwo studies the readouts from the prisoner's holding cell. The elder may be right. This being shows no remorse, no recognition of the suffering it's caused. Dr. Rice continues to watch the captive, her expression thoughtful. Perhaps, she acknowledges, but there's something we haven't tried yet. She turns to face the captain. I want to show it something about humanity it clearly doesn't understand. This approach is unprecedented. Dr. Caftry argues, eyes red-rimmed from exhaustion. The laboratory's central holodeble displays a complex molecular structure slowly rotating above scattered datapads and empty stimulant containers. We're not trying to cure the plague directly. Because we can't. Rice counters, manipulating the display to highlight specific neural connections. Not in time. But we can change how it expresses. The molecular structure transforms under her guidance, its attack vectors subtly altered. The Mercy Protocol doesn't stop the plague. It redirects it, converting the destructive feedback loops into a dormant state. You're putting them into neural stasis, asks the Mythlar scientist, plasma form fluctuating with concern. Temporarily. Rice nods. It buys us time, months, maybe years, while we work on a permanent cure. She doesn't mention her growing suspicion that the only real cure will have to come from the source. Aboard the Defiance, the interrogation of the silencer has evolved into something more complex. Ambassador Chen sits across from the being, separated only by a small table. No restraints are visible, though sophisticated containment fields remain active. The silencer's designation, translated as Verification Sequence 7D3, has been shortened by the humans to 7. Your species' fear response is fascinating. Chen observes, reviewing neural scans. When exposed to records of telepathic activity, your brain's threat detection centers activate at levels typically associated with imminent death. 7's skin flickers between translucency and opacity. What the humans have learned is an expression of emotional conflict. Telepathic detection equals extinction. The translator converts from 7's bioelectrical pulses. Your primitive auditory communication cannot comprehend. We were hunted before. By telepaths. Chen asks. By those who used telepaths as weapons. Before we developed our encryption. Before we hid, 7's internal circuitry pulses rapidly. We survived by becoming unseen, unheard, undetectable. Then the Argosians sensed us at the edges of their expansion. Our existence was compromised. Captain Okonkwo, watching from a monitoring station, exchanges glances with her security chief. They struck first because they thought they'd been discovered. Precisely. Chen confirms over the private channel. A preemptive attack born of existential terror, not malice. He turns back to 7. We propose an alternative to mutual destruction. The silencers provide the antidote to the plague. In exchange, humanity brokers a treaty establishing recognition of silencer sovereign space and non-telepathic communication protocols. 7 circuitry patterns freeze momentarily, the equivalent of shocked silence. Impossible. The Argosians will seek vengeance. Not if we succeed with the Mercy Protocol, Chen counters. And not if we demonstrate that coexistence benefits both species. The initial field test of the Mercy Protocol takes place in a sealed ward containing 50 of the most critically affected Argosians. The modified nanites, reprogrammed to redirect rather than destroy neural pathways, are administered through the crystalline architecture itself, utilizing the same delivery system the silencers originally employed. For 17 agonizing minutes, nothing changes. Then, gradually, the erratic neural patterns visible beneath translucent Argosian skin begin to stabilize. The psychic screaming that has permeated the atmosphere for weeks diminishes to a low hum. It's working, Dr. Katri confirms, monitoring the readings. Their neural patterns are transitioning to a stable hibernation state. Dr. Rice studies the data with cautious optimism. The plague is still present, but dormant. It's not attacking active neural tissue anymore. The breakthrough is immediately transmitted to the other medical teams across the planet. Within hours, the Mercy Protocol is being manufactured and deployed by all 5 medical ships. Reports begin flowing in of successful transitions across multiple infection zones. Ambassador Chen brings the news personally to 7, whose bioelectrical patterns indicate clear surprise. Your species altered the weapon rather than seeking its destruction. The translator renders. We found a third option, Chen explains. Neither annihilation nor surrender, but transformation. 7 studies the data on the Mercy Protocol with obvious fascination. This approach was not in our probability calculations. That's the thing about humans, Chen replies with a small smile. We specialize in improbability. The diplomatic negotiations advance rapidly after this demonstration of good faith. 7 reveals crucial information about the plague's fundamental structure, allowing further refinements to the Mercy Protocol. In return, Chen drafts preliminary recognition protocols that would establish silencer sovereign space while creating buffer zones with specialized communication filters to prevent accidental telepathic intrusion. As the Defiance's communications officer prepares to transmit the draft agreement to Earth, warning alarms suddenly blare throughout the ship. Confederation battlecruiser detected entering the system. Captain, reports Lieutenant Park. The righteous intervention. They're broadcasting hostile intent. The righteous intervention's massive form looms over the human fleet, its quantum phase weapons capable of disabling all 3 escort vessels simultaneously. 2 additional Confederation ships, the Mythlar cruiser Ancestral Wisdom, and the Zethanar tactical vessel Logical Conclusion, move into flanking positions, cutting off escape vectors. Evacuation of essential personnel to Nightingale proceeding, reports Lieutenant Commander Park, voice steady despite the tactical displays showing overwhelming opposition. Medical ships preparing emergency jump protocols. Captain Okonkwo studies the holographic battlefield with the calm of someone who's already accepted the worst outcome. The medical ships might escape, but we'd be sacrificing the military escorts and everyone aboard them. She turns to her tactical officer. Deploy countermeasure packages. Target their weapon systems only. Non-lethal strikes. Ma'am, the tactical officer hesitates. Even with precision targeting, we're outgunned 17-1. I'm aware, Lieutenant. Okonkwo's voice remains level. But we're not starting this fight. On the Nightingale, Dr. Rice works frantically alongside 7, who has been temporarily transferred to the medical vessel's secure laboratory. The silencer's bioelectrical patterns indicate extreme stress as its fingers, unnervingly similar to human hands despite their circuitry-laced translucency, manipulate a complex molecular structure. The plague accelerates beyond your estimates, Seven's translator conveys. Your mercy protocol requires modification to counter latest mutation. The silencer pauses, internal circuitry pulsing rapidly. Why do you continue when survival probability approaches 0? Reyes doesn't look up from her work, because survival isn't the only metric that matters. The laboratory's communication system crackles to life with Ambassador Chen's voice. Alina, we're running out of time. Confederation forces are moving to weapons range. We need another hour, she responds, watching as Seven makes minute adjustments to the molecular model. We don't have an hour. Chen's voice is tight with controlled urgency. Get to the bridge. I need your help. The tactical situation deteriorates rapidly as the Confederation commander issues ultimatums with escalating threats. In the Defiance's war room, Captain Okonkwo meets with her senior officers and the commanders of their allied vessels. The corrected shield harmonics might confuse their targeting systems, suggests Commander Shesik, golden scales reflecting the tactical displays. But not for long. The Mythlar captain's plasma form undulates with anxiety. My ship still bears Confederation transponder codes. I could approach under false pretense, then. No suicide runs. Okonkwo interrupts firmly. We're here to save lives, not sacrifice them. The view screen activates with a priority transmission from the Nightingale. Ambassador Chen appears alongside Dr. Reyes, their expressions grim but determined. Captain, we're initiating Protocol Avalanche. Okonkwo's eyes widen slightly, the only indication of surprise she allows herself. You're sure? It's our only play, Chen confirms. Stand by to receive transmission package. All ships will broadcast simultaneously on my mark. Minutes later, as Confederation weapons systems achieve final targeting lock, every communication frequency erupts with a synchronized broadcast. The image shows Chen standing in the Nightingale's main cargo bay, surrounded by hundreds of stasis pods containing Argosians in various stages of recovery. To all personnel aboard Confederation vessels, Chen begins, voice steady and clear. I am Ambassador Jackson Chen of Earth. Before you fire upon us, I ask you to witness what your weapons will destroy. The camera pans across the cargo bay, showing medical teams from multiple species working together, the faces of recovering Argosians, and most surprisingly, Seven working alongside human scientists. What you're seeing is not just a humanitarian mission, but the beginning of peace between species that believed coexistence impossible. Chen moves through the bay, the camera following. The being you know as the enemy is helping create a cure for the very weapon they deployed, not under coercion, but because we showed them an alternative to endless fear. Throughout the Confederation fleet, the broadcast reaches not just command centers, but individual stations, mess halls, and crew quarters. On the Righteous Intervention, a Dorax medical officer watches silently as the camera shows an Argosian child emerging from stasis, neural pathways glowing with restored health. I'm not asking your commanders to violate orders, Chen continues, his voice taking on new intensity. I'm asking each of you, as individuals, to remember why your species joined the Confederation in the first place. Was it to enforce quarantines while civilizations die? Or was it to build something greater than any single species could achieve alone? The broadcast ends with a simple message displayed in the written languages of every Confederation species. Narration is not OEEAKNES. For several tense minutes, nothing happens. Then, across multiple frequencies, individual voices begin to respond, not from command centers, but from ordinary crew members throughout the Confederation fleet. Dawn breaks over Argosia's Crystal Spire district, sunlight refracting through structures that once again pulse with healthy rhythmic light. 3 months after the implementation of the completed Mercy Protocol, the first Argosians awakened from neural stasis. Their telepathic voices, once silenced by agony, tentatively reach out to one another like survivors after a storm, testing connections that had been severed by pain. On observation platform overlooking the city, Dr. Elena Reyes watches alongside Captain Okonkwo and Ambassador Chen as the Argosian High Elder, fully recovered and resplendent in ceremonial crystalline armor, approaches 7. The silencer's normally fluctuating form is rigidly controlled, betraying extreme tension despite the neural dampening fields that prevent any telepathic intrusion. The moment of truth, Okonkwo murmurs. Either we've brokered peace or simply delayed war. The Elder extends a limb of pure neural energy towards 7, stopping just short of contact. We sensed your kind at the edges of our expansion. The telepathic voice is carefully modulated to reach the humans without overwhelming them. We were merely curious. 7's bioelectrical translator converts its response. Curiosity to telepaths leads to discovery. Discovery of our encryption would render us defenseless. Asterisk, yet here you stand, discovered and unharmed. The Elder's neural energy shifts to a gentler pattern, because humans taught us an alternative to fear. The formal treaty signing takes place not in the Confederation Grand Chamber, but in Argosia's restored Communion Spire. Representatives from 27 worlds attend, including many who had originally voted against intervention. 7, now formally introduced as Ambassador Initial Contact from the newly acknowledged Silencer Consensus, presents the Argosians with the final component of the cure, an adaptive neural shield technology modified from silencer encryption patterns. This will prevent similar attacks, 7 explains through the translator, while allowing your people to modulate telepathic emissions to non-threatening frequencies when near our territories. In return, the Argosian Elder presents a crystal containing the complete telepathic signature of their species, not taken, but voluntarily shared. We offer transparency where once there was suspicion. The Elder communicates. May knowledge replace fear. The moment 7 accepts the crystal, a ripple of astonishment passes through the assembled diplomats. It marks the first time in recorded history that a telepathic species has voluntarily shared its neural patterns with a non-telepathic civilization. 3 weeks later, as the Mercy Fleet prepares to return to Earth, construction begins on a permanent monument in Argosia's Central Plaza. The structure, a collaboration between Argosian crystal shapers, human architects, and silencer bioelectric engineers, takes the form of 3 intertwined neural patterns: Argosian, human, and silencer. Beneath it, inscribed in the languages of all 3 species, are the words, different paths, same destination, compassion. In the Confederation Grand Chamber, a special session convenes to address the Argosian intervention. The proceedings open with the unprecedented step of admitting testimony from non-member species, including a delegation of silencers, their presence requiring significant adaptations to the Chamber's security protocols. Ambassador Chen, reinstated with full diplomatic credentials, delivers the closing address. Rather than triumph or vindication, his speech focuses on the future. Today we ratify amendments to the Sentient Rights Charter that recognize the obligation to render aid regardless of species, affiliation, or past conflicts. He states, but laws alone cannot create what we witnessed on Argosia, the willingness to see beyond difference, to recognize fear as the enemy rather than each other. He gestures to the assembled representatives, making eye contact with species who had once condemned humanity's actions. You call us sentimental, naive, even reckless. Perhaps we are all these things, but sentiment gave us courage when logic counseled abandonment. Naivety allowed us to imagine peace where history predicted only war. And sometimes, recklessness is simply another word for hope. As Chen concludes, the Confederation votes unanimously to establish the Mercy Protocol as standard procedure for all future cross-species crises. More significantly, they create a permanent rapid response fleet with rotating command amongst member species, though by informal agreement, the flagship always carries at least 1 human medical officer. They name it, simply, Mercy.